Hello. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to cover spells and trap cards kind of at a beginner level that are really universal, that are going to serve you no matter what deck you're playing. You're going to have probably at least a few of these in. And as you can change decks that you play, especially in the meta, fairly often, you're probably going to have at least a few of these in almost every deck being played. So there's a lot of value in trying to get one or two or even three of these cards where you can. Um, and in doing so, I'm going to go ahead and walk through kind of each card and what exactly they do. So to start off, you can see on the right side I have them with a favorite marker on. That's just my way of saying, like, if I'm putting a deck together, it could be for playing PvP, it could be for an event going on. I know they're cards that I'm going to use pretty often. So with that, I try to favorite them and make it easier to find them rather than have to search their name every single time. So I have some of them put in the deck, but there's a few of them because of the limit tags. They're not going to allow me to put multiple within the deck. So I'm actually going to work over from the corner here. And again, I'll walk through each card, kind of click on them so we can have them up on screen. We'll have the name. I'll put the names in the description too. In addition to talking about the effect, I just want to talk about what exactly it does and why that's powerful. So we'll start off with Book of Moon. Book of Moon is a quick play spell card. And we're going to see that with a lot of these being quick play. And what exactly does quick play mean? With the spell card, it means that you can activate it if it's face down on your side of the field during your opponent's turn. So kind of the traditional effect of a trap card. But you can, again, activate it in your opponent's turn. So it has a lot of power there. Now, Book of Moon is a very straightforward effect, but is incredibly powerful too. So you can target one monster on the field, change that target to face down defense position. So you're typically going to use this on your opponent's turn. You could use it on your turn, but like if they're attacking with the card, and it can stop that attack. The other really, really common use is if they're going to chain summon, like if they're trying to do a synchro summon, if they're trying to do an Xyz summon or a link summon, and they have the cards out on the field that they need to go through with that chain. Book of Moon, you can use it to flip one of those cards face down. They can no longer get that chain off as long as they can't flip over that card, back to face up this turn, which, normally you're going to use it on a card that is summoned this turn. So, it's very, very common for Book of Moon to be played in decks, and 2 copies is usually good. 3 is a lot, because the only drawback really is that you can't flip a Link monster face down. So when there's a lot of Link monsters being played in the meta, I think having 3 of this card in your deck is a lot, because they just won't be able to be used there, but 1 or 2, very, very common in meta decks. So the next one is Cosmic Cyclone, and there's 2 others that I'm going to mention kind of in the same breath, but pretty straightforward card here. You pay 1,000 life points, you can target 1 spell or trap on the field, and banish it. So Backrow removal, very common theme. The other thing to keep in mind is the trade-off here, where you pay 1,000 life points, but you banish it instead of destroy it. Now, that is, the 1,000 life points isn't technically a lot. I know it is 25% of your life points starting out in Duel Links, but usually that trade-off, like if you're protecting your life points in a sense where you're not leaving your board wide open, then is a little bit negligible. Unless your opponent's playing a burn deck where they're kind of just chipping away at your life points there, it usually doesn't matter, especially if it's something helping you get to a stronger attack. The trade-off for getting rid of a card in the back row that in many cases is one of the cards in this list is totally worth it. Now, in addition to Cosmic Cyclone, we also have Mystical Space Typhoon. Both of these cards are quick play spells. Mystical Space Typhoon, it targets the card in the background and destroys it. There's no life point cost. Very, very common to use. Not as common, but it used to be as Galaxy Cyclone, which is fairly similar. And I think if you can't get, multiple, which I only have 1 Cosmic Cyclone, I have 2 MSTs, and I ended up with 3 Galaxy Cyclones. Sometimes you end up with them by accident, in a sense where like you'll go to get one from a main box or a mini box that they're in, but then if you're going through a selection box, for example, and they also have them, that's how I got 4 Book of Moons. It was pretty much unintentional. Galaxy Cyclone is a good kind of backup if you don't have multiple of there. But I think between these 2 of Galaxy Cyclone and Mystical Space Typhoon, if you can have 3 total, that's fantastic, and all you need there. I'm adding Darkhold to this list because it is, I don't think it's as high as a priority as other cards in this list, but I do think it is growing there. It is not quick play spells, and it's going to be one of only a few spells in this list that is not quick play. But very straightforward effect if it destroys all monsters on the field. Not too much to talk about, but I think the two use cases that really come to mind, you don't want to destroy your own monsters. I think that's pretty straightforward. But one use case is if you have it in your opening hand and you go second, your opponent, gets a full board of powerful monsters. You play Dark Hole, and it will destroy all your opponent's monsters, and because you don't have any, then there's nothing to be destroyed. Another use case is even if you do have monsters on the field, a lot of cards these days are going to have protection where something like Neos Fusion, where instead of destroying the monster, you can use an effect to not let it get destroyed by the effect, so your opponent's cards are going to get destroyed, and yours are not. So despite it saying destroy all monsters in the field, that level of protection is going to make it very, very powerful. Next up, we have Forbidden Chalice and Forbidden Lance. Forbidden Lance is used a little bit more, but Forbidden Chalice, target one monster in the field that adds 400 attack, but its effects are negated. So if you're going against an opponent's monster, multiple uses. So if you're going against an opponent's monster that has an effect that makes it like, so you can't be attacked, or it's going to be able to stop you from using a monster effect, or it can stop a spell or trap. Use this, adds a little bit of life or attack points, but you can get off the spells or the effects that you're looking for. So that attack point boost isn't really going to be helpful, especially if it's a low attack point monster. Or if you're in a situation where like your monster has 200 less attack points and you need to just survive, could trigger this. It has more attack points, and then it can destroy the opponent's monster. So multiple uses. And same thing here with Forbidden Lance. So opposite kind of effect with the attack points, where the monster targeted loses 800 attack points, but it's unaffected by cards of spells and or effects of spells and traps other than this card for the rest of the turn. So if your opponent plays something like Dark Hole, and I have Forbidden Lance face down, I can turn it over there and use it on one of my powerful monsters, and it won't be destroyed by Dark Hole. So that's fantastic. It is a really, really strong level of protection, or similar like to Forbidden Chalice there. Second kind of way of using it is if you have an opponent's monster with 500 more attack points than your monster, go ahead and use Forbidden Lance, and is now weaker and can be destroyed. So I think you can kind of see a lot, there's a theme here where a lot of these cards, especially when we go into the traps, going to have multiple use cases and going to make it really, really powerful there. So we'll move on. Monster Reborn, very, very straightforward. I don't think this should be the priority in most decks, but I think when you look at the limited one deck or card list there, and sometimes like if you don't have a limited one card in your deck, then you should consider it, and this will be a really good option. Very straightforward. Special summon one monster from either player's graveyard. Decks where you have very, very powerful monsters, bring them back, or one of your opponents. Not quick play, and again, this is only one of a few that does that, but certain decks this can be a really good fit for. Those are the spells. I think, there's other ones that people could say really high priority too, but what jumps out universally is these. And we'll move on to the traps then. A Bottomless Trap Hole is a pretty new card. This is kind of a like proxy one where if you can't get the other ones, or the other ones are limited in a deck where you already have like limit 3 cards being used, I think this is a good backup to have. When your opponent special summons a monster with 1500 or more attack, destroy it and then banish it. The banishing effect is really nice, but powerful monsters are going to have 1500 or more attack, and it's just a way of getting rid of a powerful monster your opponent has, so pretty straightforward there. The banishing effect obviously does not hurt either. Now we're going to move into a bunch of limit 3 traps, so again this means that you can only have up to 3 total from the list, not just 3 of the specific card, but I've played decks that you may have seen that are going to have like one of each of 3 different cards within this list here. First being compulsory evacuation device. I call it evac. I've heard people call it compulse, compulsory, whatever you want to call it. This, you can target one monster in the field and you can return that card back to the hand. So at least 2 good use cases here. If your opponent has a very, very powerful boss monster in the field, you pop this card and it goes back to, whether it's the hand, it goes back to the extra deck. Let's say it's a Link 4 monster. And all of the materials are destroyed if it's like an Xyz monster or something like that. So Very powerful in that way, and sometimes returning to the hand is actually more powerful than destroying the monster. A lot of cards are going to have an effect of when it's destroyed, you can do this or do that, but if you return to the hand, that effect doesn't go off. That, as well as sometimes if a card is in the graveyard, it'll have an effect, as well as any attached cards could have an effect in the graveyard. So I'm sorry, the attached cards will still go to the graveyard, but the card itself, because it's not destroyed, is gonna not trigger that. So a little bit of flexibility, that would be the first use case. But the second, at times, if you have an effect monster, a monster that its effect is going to be triggered when you return it to your, or I'm sorry, when you put it on the field, um, you can play this card. Obviously, you can't do it the turn that it's put face down, but the following turn, bring that effect monster back to your hand and summon it again for the effect to go off another time. So I wouldn't say it's the primary use case, but is very, very powerful. Next card on the list being Crackdown. And I should say for a couple of the Limit 3 cards right now, they can only be obtained from different selection boxes, so not from like main and mini boxes available normally. So they should be added to normal boxes soon, but just keep an eye out there if you don't have these and are looking to obtain them. That would be the way to do it. Now, Crackdown is very, very common in the meta right now. You target one monster your opponent has, and it can't attack, but you basically take control of the monster until Crackdown is removed from the field. Now, you've probably seen many duels of me using this against, for example, the Phantom Knight stack, when opponent will bring out the Requiem Dragon, they'll bring out Breaksword, where you just steal the monster, and if they can't destroy either the monster or Crackdown, then they're crap out of luck there. So, in some situations, it's better to steal the monster than have it go to their graveyard. Like we were talking about with evac, sometimes return to the hand is more powerful, sometimes taking control is more powerful. It's very situational, and depending on like the strengths or weaknesses of your deck, you pick which things to include. But Crackdown is very, very powerful overall. This doesn't see a ton of use anymore, but I think depending on the deck, it is worth mentioning. Floodgate Trap Hole. Now, it's kind of like Book of Moon in the sense where it just flips a monster face down, but Book of Moon, the card can be flipped over next turn. With Floodgate Trap Hole, like your opponent summons a monster, it gets flipped face down, but it can't flip face up from just them doing it. It would have to be attacked or something like that. So if the card isn't kind of tributed, like with the normal summon, that card is just locked down face down and can't, that monster zone is basically taken out of play until they do something about it. So it can be very powerful for that reason. But again, I would prefer like the other limited cards on here, but depending on the deck, I think it could be a pretty cool addition. This is, I'll probably argue, my favorite trap card on this list here as of recently, because I've really figured out the use cases and when it works, when it doesn't. Probably 3 primary use cases here that I'll say. The first off being, okay, so you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard. You can special summon it to your field. The effects are negated. Then you can, and I'm emphasizing the can, banish one monster from both players' fields that have the same type as each other. What this means, basically, your opponent, you take one card from their graveyard. Now, first off, if your opponent is doing like a Phantom Knights play where they're trying to bring back cards from their graveyard, you can activate it. And they're trying to bring back 2 level 3 or 4 monsters to exceed someone to level 4. Well, guess what? You pop this card and you can steal one of their cards, and they won't be able to do that. So you can break their play with that. If your opponent has a very, very powerful monster in the field and at least one monster in the graveyard, very often decks are going to be playing the same types of monsters, so you can steal one card there. It's going to have the same type, and you can banish both of the cards in that way. So that's the second use case. And the third one being very straightforward, of you can almost use it as a monster reborn. So if, like, again with Phantom Knights, if they have a Requiem Dragon, and you don't have anything powerful in the field, you can activate the effect here, and because you can banish one monster from both players' field, you don't have to. So they might have like a weaker monster out, but you take the stronger one, well, they have to just get around that stronger monster because you didn't get rid of the one on your field now. So very, very flexible trap. I have 2. I don't think you can go wrong having 3 in your deck, just depending on what the deck is, but like any other card in this list, they fit into many, many different decks. So I would put this as one of the highest priorities if you're trying to figure out what cards to get here. Next up, we have Karma Cut. Pretty straightforward. Discard one card, then banish one face-up monster your opponent controls. Then banish all cards with the same name as that monster from your opponent's graveyard. So some decks it is a better fit for, but if you're just looking for a card that's going to be able to just get rid of opponents' monsters, great fit. Now, if you're looking for cards that can also help you get your hand to the graveyard, something like a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck where you're trying to get the White Stone of Ancient to the graveyard, perfect fit there. And then if it's, if it's common in the meta that they're going to have multiple monsters with the same name, that second part of the effect can be very powerful too. I wouldn't put it as the highest priority card, but it is really nice to have. Mirror Force, not the highest priority either, but if you're not using the limited one list, I think it's something you can consider putting in your deck. It is going to, when your opponent declares an attack, destroy all face-up attack position monsters your opponent controls. Very, very powerful in the right situation, and the reason I say that is because in today's meta, it would be considered slow, meaning like you have to wait until a certain trigger to activate the card, and that trigger being attacking. But on this list, I've highlighted Cosmic Cyclone, I've Mystical Space Typhoon, Galaxy Cyclone. Like there's a lot of cards that can snipe this card in the back row before it's able to be activated, and that's a little bit of a problem. But it can be powerful if your opponent attacks and it gets activated there. So worth adding to the list, and especially because everyone was gifted it for free should you be playing the game at the right time. Now, common trap here, one of my favorites for sure. Treacherous Trap Hole. If you have no trap cards in your graveyard, target 2 monsters in the field, destroy them. This is powerful. You just get rid of 2 really strong cards. And, it is really, really... It was common before, but I think the drawback here is obviously you can't have any spells in your graveyard to activate it. Now, what that ends up actually meaning is that many people will play this as the only trap within a deck there, because you don't want to get in a situation where, like, you already have a trap there and the card is basically useless. So that is kind of the one caveat, but if you're looking for one trap card to include in your deck to be very powerful, this would be the one, but it can limit you in other ways. And then the last one I have here, this has really grown on me as of recent, is Warning Point. It almost acts like a Book of Moon in the sense where like it destroys your opponent's momentum if they're trying to do kind of a chain summon there, where if they summon a monster, that monster can attack, its effects are negated, and it can't be used for material fusion, synchro, exceeds, link summon. So any chain they're trying to put together this turn is basically stopped, and they're held there. So like in the reality, like, oh, one card is not, be able to use for one turn, that doesn't sound like a big deal. But it's more about just stopping the momentum they have. It's about them not being able to access the card, and when they do that, they often have to end their turn. It's your turn, and that card is just waiting to be destroyed, and will really hurt their ability to kind of take over the duel with that combo that they were looking at. So these are all of the cards that I have on my list. Again, there's others that you can argue would fit or should be, higher priority maybe, but I think even within this, some are higher priority than others. But in the big picture, if you are a beginner on Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links and you're trying to figure out what cards to go after first, I don't think you'd be wrong to start with cards on this list, and can kind of make a lot of improvement to the decks that you're playing. So hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and I'll definitely be doing more content like this moving forward. So take care.